I thought let's just start at the beginning. So if someone's just tuning into this right now, would you just give us a little flavor of the benefits of CO2 in the human body? Just give us a kind of helicopter view of why people should stick around for this episode.
Yeah, so CO2 is normally considered the villain, right? It's just a waste product. Get it out of your body as soon as possible we talk about our own body. And when we talk about global warming or pollution, CO2 is the villain. So it's a little bit of a hard sell. But actually, if you look at someone with a panic attack, the ultimate stress, or someone afraid of flying, and they come to the hospital or they uh, get the flight attendant, they would be given a bag to breathe in and out through, and that is uh, carbon dioxide therapy, CO2 therapy. They are rebreathing some of the CO2 they just exhaled, and that in itself says a lot. I think that what happens then? This stressed, afraid, worried brain, it actually lacks oxygen and it lacks blood. So CO2 is the main regulator of blood flow to the brain. So that's why we get stupid if we go around hyperventilating. We blow off too much CO2, restricting the blood vessels, so less blood flow to the brain, and we get stressed or worried or anxious or right out stupid. So CO2 helps us regulate blood flow to the brain, so we can actually um, oxygenate our brain, so we can stay calm and focused and alert and energetic and happy.
So a lot of benefits to this, and we're going to really deep dive in. And
Yeah.
this is probably a good place to say that this is the first time we've done this on this podcast, but we're about to do a giveaway. And so we're going to have a little bit of a competition. So would you just introduce people to the Carbo Inhaler and just explain what it is and how they could potentially get one?
Yes, absolutely. Let me show it. So it's a little device that you hook up to a CO2 source, which could be a larger CO2 tank or a soda stream cylinder, and then you just connect it to a face mask, and you then spike the air you inhale with a little extra CO2. So that is kind of bag breathing in digital form. And this is the ultimate CO2 therapy. But you can do it on your own. CO2 therapy, in my definition, is basically slightly restricting the oxygen intake and slightly raising the CO2 levels in your body. And you can do this just now when you're listening by just slowing down your breathing. That is CO2 therapy in its simplest form. And then you can engage in using a product like this, where you then give yourself a real boost. So typically you will inhale 50 to 200 times more CO2 than you normally inhale. And what we see and what science support, we hear over and over again that people feel more mental clarity, more energy. They feel that the airways open up. So it's just, oh, I can breathe more easily. They feel if you do a workout or you go out for a run or a bike after inhaling extra CO2, you may find that you have more endurance or you find yourself being stronger.
Yeah. Okay. And so if people want to get involved in this, we're running this till the end of September
Yeah,
2025. And you can win one of these. And they're retailing for how much right now, Anders? What's the current price for those?
€800.
Okay, so they're €800. You've got a chance to win one on this podcast. The address is consciousbreath.com. Conscious breathing.
Consciousbreathing.com.
Consciousbreathing.com. Thank you. I'll put the text below. Consciousbreathing.com /TADB. The link will be down below. Just let us know why you would like one, and we will pick a winner at random, and we'll update you on that. And let's talk a bit about these carbo inhalers, because we're going to be doing a documentary on this soon, which is really cool. I'm going to be a bit of a guinea pig. I'm going to be going through the process, and we're going to measure everything and see what happens. So could you just give us a little bit of an overview, Anders, as to why you created this and maybe just some of the things you've seen with some of the people you've been working with?
Yes, so I started conscious breathing 16 years ago when I discovered that I could use my breath as a tool to calm down my, at the time, racing mind. And it basically changed my life. And maybe just a few months later, I had already started doing nasal breathing while running and other types of physical activity, and noticed the benefits. I started taping my mouth shut at night, and all of these things to slow down my breathing, to optimize the level of oxygen and carbon dioxide in my body. But when it really hit home, the power of CO2, when I went out for a jog, a 1 hour jog, and I did nasal breathing, but I also tried to reduce my breathing as much as possible. So basically, every step, every breath felt like painful. Please let me take this big breath through my mouth so that I can get little more more carbon dioxide out of my system. But I stick to it, and then when I came home, I felt a I was in a state that I've never ever experienced before. It was complete state of bliss. I remember sitting down at the kitchen table, and 3 hours later, I was still sitting there, just admiring, I don't know, the universe, or just being completely content and happy and harmonious. That was for me really the breakthrough, how important CO2 is if you want to find that inner calmness, and that this it was the CO2 that was the calming effect that made me get out of my racing mind. And if you think about it, oxygen is activating, CO2 is relaxing. Those are the yin and yang. With every breath, we exchange the two. We take in oxygen, we exhale CO2. And if you were to describe the modern man, if you came from another planet and visited planet Earth, you would see that we are inactive, we are stressed out, and we go for junk food and junk drinks. And all of them affect our breathing. When we overbreathe, when we are stressed, we breathe out more CO2. When we are inactive, we produce less CO2. When we go for the junk food and the junk drinks, we will upset the pH balance in our body, and breathing is our number one pH regulator. So we will then again engage in overbreathing. So that is why CO2 therapy is needed for so many of us. We need that boost in order to get out of that vicious health cycle.
Yeah. I told you this before we hit record, but I wanted to discuss it and get your thoughts. So I had a client recently who wears glasses. And but by the way, I'd heard from a podcast guest years ago that breathing could improve eyesight, and I remember thinking at the time that what a load of rubbish, but I just didn't know enough and let it go. And anyway, so I'm working with this client and we're doing really slow breathing, like we're quite advanced now, we've been going for a couple of months, and she's really working on very, very light, very, very slow breath work, a lot of CO2 coming up in the body, playing with CO2 tolerance. And at the end of one of these sessions she was like, oh my god, everything's so clear. I can see, she was looking out the window, and I was like, are you okay? She goes, yeah, I'm just enjoying looking at the trees outside the window. I've never seen things so clear. And I was like, wow, this is what I'd heard, that CO2 could improve eyesight. Now, I don't know how long that lasts for, but can you give me your thoughts on what might be going on there?
Yeah, so I mean, the brain is our main consumer of oxygen, and 20% of the blood flow roughly goes to the brain, and the 20% of the oxygen consumption occurs in the brain. And the main oxygen consumer in our brain is the eyesight. So if we have breathing patterns that have room for improvement, then we probably the eyesight would be suffering, right? So when you train to become a pilot and you simulate being at like 10,000 meters, and you simulate a sudden drop in oxygen, the first thing that occurs is that they lose their eyesight, or it gets compromised. So from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense that when she started to breathe slower, and then gained more CO2 in our body, and also restricted the oxygen intake, I think that is also important. The increase in CO2 will open up the blood vessels, so more blood to the brain, more oxygen to the brain, and more nutrients to the brain, so that the eyesight could then maybe get the energy it needs to
Mm.
perform its task. Yeah.
And so I guess if we just took that a step further, if we can get somebody just naturally breathing slower and more gently, then it's unlikely that's going to make eyesight worse, right? That's only going to help people. It's unlikely things would get worse if we trained our CO2 sensitivity to be better and be able to breathe more gently.
Yeah, likely it would at least stay the same. I mean,
Yeah.
I wear glasses when I'm reading, so I'm still waiting for a breakthrough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in theory, yeah, I think improving your breathing habits, slowing down your breathing, increase your ability to tolerate CO2 would have a positive, or could have a positive
Mhm.
impact on your eyesight.
Yeah, again, this was just in the moment. I
Yep.
would be interested to know what would happen if she did that for a couple of years. Would it get better, or is it just an in the moment thing? But yeah, as I thought, it's unlikely to hurt if you slow your breathing rate down. A question I get a lot, and one that I would love to get your thoughts on,
Mhm.
is a breath hold on full lungs versus empty lungs. I find that if I squeeze all the air out my system and I hold my breath, the urgency will happen quicker. And I'll feel like, oh, I need to breathe a bit quicker. If I fill up with air and I hold my breath, I feel like I can go longer. And other people
Yeah.
have shared the same thing. Where this gets a bit confusing and a bit technical for people is if CO2 is the impulse to breathe, why
Mhm.
would the amount of air in the lungs have any effect on a breath hold?
Okay, this is a question I haven't thought about before. It's interesting. So, if I'm filling up my lungs with air,
Hmm.
I can then hold my breath for longer.
Mm.
And that speaks against the theory which says that it's the CO2 levels that controls our breathing.
Mm. And it's not just about it being longer, it's the impulse to breathe kicks in quicker. Now, I don't know
Mm.
if it's something to do with the stretch receptors of the lungs, or there's a placebo effect because we know we've got loads of
Yeah.
oxygen in our body. Maybe our body panics when there's no air in the lungs. But yeah, I'd just be curious if you had any
Probably
insights.
there are more mechanisms at play, right?
Mm.
Yeah. But I haven't investigated it. But I think it's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would play with that
Yeah,
myself.
have a think. Yeah, because the same, I'm like, well, that goes against the general thing. And then same with like, I was thinking about free divers, because they take these big breaths of air, but they need the oxygen, right? Because they're going underwater, and
They
that's
need the
their
oxygen. Yeah. So there
yeah.
has to be some sort of mechanism at play there. Yeah.
Mm.
That we need the oxygen. So I mean, normal breathing, that's when we check for CO2. But for example, if you have severe COPD, where you deprive your body of oxygen, you may have low oxygen saturation. So there then are other mechanisms stepping in, right? Checking the oxygen levels. They, as your health goes down and down, your oxygen levels will be more important. But
Mm.
normally, it will be the CO2 levels that controls your breathing.
It could also be engagement of the diaphragm that I thought as well. Maybe when the diaphragm's in an exhaled position, maybe the body's not so comfortable there and it's trying to get us to breathe. So the
Yeah,
urgency kicks in. I don't know. Anyway, if anyone else is watching and they've got insights, put it in the comments because I find
yeah,
that
please
that a
do.
fascinating one. Okay, so I would love to talk to you a bit about the Relaxator. And
Yeah.
thank you, first of all, for creating this because I've been using this now for years. I actually got my first one from James Nestor, the author of Breath, on his retreat. And I was, oh, I've heard of this, but I've never used it before. And so I thought what would be useful is maybe if you could just, again, overview what this is, what it does, and then we could just pick it apart a little bit because I recommend everybody should have one of these because they're so useful. So yeah, if you could share with us, please, Mr. Inventor of this.
Yeah, we invented it, I think, in 2011, so a few years ago, actually. But it's very simple, and that's the thing. I investigated those devices out there on the market, and I always found that they were a bit big and clumsy. So we developed something that should be easy to hold with your lips, should be lightweight, so that you could use it for a longer time without feeling strain in your jaws. So you put it between your lips, and you set a resistance between 1 and 5. Uh, and that resistance will then mean that you prolong the exhale. And I tend to say on my lectures that if you forget everything else, remember to close your mouth and prolong your exhale. That's the key if you want to balance your nervous system, slow down your nervous system. So inhale is activation. Exhale is relaxation. When you inhale, the pulse actually goes up, and when you exhale, the pulse goes down. And that's the definition of heart rate variability, the heart's ability to be active when it should and relaxing when it should. So if you have the right balance between inhale and exhale, you will automatically have a higher HRV. And anyway, the idea then is you prolong the exhale to induce a more parasympathetic state. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily get tired and want to go to sleep. It means that you can also get alert and focused, because in general, if I'm have a task to solve and I'm too much in sympathetic, which a lot of us are, we are stressed out, we are anxious, we need to take breaks now and then, we need to do stupid things, call our best friend. We interrupt ourselves from doing the very thing we should do. And I think it's the brain that plays these tricks on us, because we don't give the brain what it needs more than anything, which is oxygen. And with this, you get this low diaphragmatic breathing, you activate the diaphragm, and slow breathing, and also the rhythmic breathing. So most of us, we have a tendency when we sit and concentrate and focus to shift between breath holds and breathing too fast. Both of them will interrupt the oxygen supply to the brain. That's why the brain makes up all these things we need to do that we actually don't need to do. But if we put this in our mouth, that is my experience and many others, then we will ensure a steady supply of oxygen to the brain through this rhythmic breathing. And the brain will then allow us to do anything, because it gets what it wants, the number one thing, which is oxygen. And also it increases the pressure in the lungs and airways. So you get a slightly more efficient gas exchange in the lungs. And this, for many people, is a narrow section in the throat, which could become evident when we go to sleep. And we may end up snoring or get sleep apnea. So training this area, the muscle tonus in this area, you can also train it with the relaxator to ensure that they work well to keep the airways open. And finally, I should say that when you also increase the pressure, you get more circulation, not only in the lungs, but also in the sinus area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many things. I think there was a study that came out this year, actually. I need to go back and see if I can find it, around using a device like this and improvements in sleep apnea. So what you're saying about the toning of the throat area. For me, the big thing that I've always found really interesting is, like, it's just a really good, I call this the breath gym sometimes, because it's a bit like trying to work the diaphragm a little bit harder as well, because it has to, suddenly now, like, your breath has to go through like a little pinprick, whereas it's normally out the mouth or out the nose. And so the big things that I work with clients when we use this, and again, every client, I get this for them straight away, is slow exhale, which is really relaxing. I had one guy that was really stressed all the time, and we weren't even using this to relax. We were using this to work on his respiratory muscles, because he was a fit, gym guy, and he's like, Jesus, I feel so calm. And I was like, oh, let's keep going. So yeah, the long exhales, the working of the diaphragm, and the CO2, right? Because the breath is so slow. If you breathe in really slow through the nose, and then you're breathing out through the pinprick, and you're doing that for several minutes, I found that, I can feel that my CO2 levels are starting to come up, which I find is a bit hard for people that haven't played with it to understand, because everyone's like, wow, you're breathing through the mouth. You shouldn't be breathing through the mouth. And can you just talk a bit about the mouth breathing and the relaxator? Because I think that's the bit that I get asked the most questions about. Just going to pause the podcast for a second. I'm super excited to share that our 7-day breathwork reset program, or burnout reset program, is for a limited time completely free. I've been running this course for about a year. We've had amazing results, and it's designed for you if you are tired and exhausted and you've got no time. So the less time the better. It's only 7 minutes a day, this course, and it's a 7-day program, and it's designed to build habits, healthy, sustainable habits using the breath. And so I wanted to make it accessible to you for a period of time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this podcast. So the link's down below. It's a professionally edited and put together course. It's all held in a lovely place, and you get to keep it for life as well. So grab the link below, and my suggestion is this: if you're going to do it, then do it. Don't put it off. Don't grab the link and think I'll do that next week. It's only 7 minutes, so I would get the link, and then after this podcast, after you finish watching it, get signed up, get enrolled, and just do the exercises that I send you each and every day and have fun with it. And I promise you, at the end of the 7 days, you'll be a different person to who you are watching this video right now. So the link's down below. It's only free for a limited time. It's usually about $77 to $97. We play with the price a little bit, but I wanted to give you a little gift. So link's down there, grab it, and let's get back on with the show. Cheers.
Yeah, same here, and that's, I guess it's a trade-off. Yeah, if you make a plus minus pro con calculation. So what are the advantages? We've already touched on them, and the disadvantage would then be that, yeah, you exhale through the mouth, but there are way more positive effects of using it. And I should also say that you don't need the relaxator. You could do pursed lip breathing. You could do ujjayi breathing by just squeezing the air out. What we found, though, is that this is a simpler tool, because engaging in pursed lip breathing for a longer period of time it's easy to forget it. You start doing it, and then within a minute or two, your brain is going somewhere else, and then you forget it. But it's important that is where it comes from. Pursed lip breathing, ujjayi breathing, a prolonged exhale breathing.
Yes, no, I love that. And yeah, you're right. If you're stuck without a device and you're on a train or something, you can really slow your breath down completely naturally. Blowing out the candle breath, I think we used to call it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted just to say, because I'm a massive advocate of these, is I was using balloons a lot in my early days, and teaching people to blow balloons for respiratory muscle training.
Yeah.
And then it was only recently I had this like horrible taste in my mouth. I was like, what is that from the balloon? And I just went on down a bit of a rabbit hole, and the horrific chemicals that are in balloons to make them so stretchy and expansive, that really bad for you, like these forever chemicals that are in there, and so so now I don't want to use balloons, and we don't want balloons in the house. So again, another reason why, if you're going to do something like that, I found this. So for people that watch the last ones are asking where to get these, I'm gonna pop the link down below. So if you're interested in getting one, they're very inexpensive. There's no batteries needed. It sounds like a sales pitch, but genuinely I've got one. I've been using it for years, and I can't thank you enough for creating it, because it's just been the best thing.
Thank you for being such a good ambassador.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I know Ben Greenfield, the biohacker, he's a big fan. He was using them when I met him a couple of years ago. So I would say, look, pursed lips breathing, if you don't have the budget. If you do have a few dollars, then I'd head on over, and I would try one of these. And
and James Nestor is also a big fan. I remember he said, I've been using it all the time writing my book, Breath. Because it at the end of the day, it really helps you to stay focused and concentrated.
Yes. Well, I've suffered with that email apnea. For people that don't know, it's when you hold your breath when you're a bit stressed, or you're doing an email and you start to change your breathing pattern. But again, what I found with this, and it's so useful with like your business name as well, the conscious breathing, like it really does remind you to breathe slowly. So you can just have it on while you're at your desk, and you can just be breathing very, very slowly through it. And there's a little noise that you can hear, like a very subtle noise. And so you're just consciously being reminded to keep breathing deep and slow. So it's a real hack. So no, thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So let's move on a little bit. I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about the history of CO2 and what you've discovered on your research, because it's absolutely fascinating. So if you could give us a bit of an overview about what you've been writing about recently.
Yeah, recently I published an article about the history of CO2 on our website, and it is fascinating. So the concept comes from these mineral springs, the hot springs that are around the globe, mainly in areas where there have been more volcanic activity. And already the Greeks, there are documentation that they used it a lot, these hot springs and these mineral springs. And it turns out that one of the main active ingredients in these springs is high levels of carbon dioxide. And then the Romans took over and they perfected it and took it to the next level. So they had a lot of these hot springs. And because they noted it had a positive effect on the skin, on the circulation, on the stress. And the Romans, they were known for fighting, so they were out fighting, and then they needed when they came home to recover. So they ended up in these baths, and they built them all across Europe. Whenever they conquered new land, they they built this huge spa facilities. There are actually next month we will go to one of them in Czechia, and they were at the height of the Roman bathing culture. They were consuming in Rome 10 times as much water as we consume here in Sweden today per person. So one of the biggest spa facilities, it could accommodate 3,000 people at the same time. So there were up to 10,000 people a day. And even they say that the Roman Empire fell because they spent too much time in these spas. And actually, the interesting thing is that they were so much into cleaning and having all these ointments and fragrances, and then when the Roman Empire fell, Christianity started to rise. And actually, at the end of the Roman Empire, one of the emperors, he made Christianity the state religion. And as the Roman Empire went down and Christianity went up, they started to look at the Romans as immoral and all the things that the Romans stood for that was not good. So let's do the complete opposite. So there was a 180 degree U-turn where the Christianity, it was more considered being dirty. Smelling was being close to God, kind of. That was they everything the Romans stood for, they saw that as immoral. And it took about 1,000 years before when the Renaissance came along, that it started to be rediscovered, the power of these hot springs and how to actually benefit from them. And there is the first medical records I have seen is from your country, from the city of Bath, near Bristol, where there was a book published in 1794 by Dr. John Ewart, 2 cases of ulcerated breast cancer treated with carbon dioxide. So he created a device that could be put over the breast and deliver continuous flow of CO2. And there was one woman, within 1 month, she had such a pain that she was screaming up to 2 hours per day because of the pain. The wound was open wound, like 10 times 15 centimeters. And within a month, it was a third of that size because of CO2's healing effect. And the reason why he made that was because the hospital that was founded in 1741 in Bath, around this mineral spring that contained a lot of CO2, they noticed a lot of positive healing effect. One of the main issues at the time was lead poisoning, because the water pipes, they contained a lot of lead. So people got lead poisoning. So when they did a comparison there a number of years between the hospital in Bath and the hospital in Exeter in the success in treating lead poisoning, the Bath was a lot better, the Bath hospital, in treating those, probably because they had this access to these CO2 baths. So that's kind of the history, and then it evolved more and more, and there is another book came out in 1905 called Carbon Dioxide in Medicine, published by Dr. Achilles Rose in US, and the book talks about how they use CO2 therapy in all kinds of settings. There is even a picture in the book from 1895, New York State Hospital in Manhattan, where they have a nurse sitting between two bathtubs filled up with water, and then a device giving CO2 to the bats. So they took CO2 bats. There is a device where they inhale CO2. They gave CO2 rectally. And I remember from the book, he said they had 95% success rate with, I don't remember the name of the disease, but basically you get diarrhea, and if it's not treated, you may die of dehydration. Yeah. So then there is a book I read recently, The Healing Properties of CO2. No, it's The Healing Properties of Spa, from the Balkan to the Black Sea, where a friend of mine, she visited during a 3-year period, she visited 55 spa in Eastern Europe. And most of them, or all of them, are built around these mineral springs. And most of these springs have high levels of CO2. And they've been knowing this for a very long time, and saw the benefits. And there is one, for example, in Transylvania. It's they call their treatment natural Viagra. So you go into a cave and it contains 96% CO2. You don't inhale it, of course. That will not be good for you. But the CO2 goes up around to your waist, and people going in there, they feel a warm sensation in the crotch area, and it increases the lust. And it makes a lot of sense, because CO2 is really a parasympathetic agent in a sense. And having an erection for a man or a lust for a woman is to start with a parasympathetic. If you're too much in stress and activity, I mean, if you live in a war zone, you wouldn't go and create a baby, kind of. The ultimate stress. You would try to survive. So the more we're in survival mode, the less we're interested in sexual activities. So that's their approach. There is one in Czechia. Czechia is called Mariánské Lázně. That's the place we will go to. They have a great history of CO2 therapy. It's called the City of 100 Springs. So there are 40 mineral springs in the city itself, and 100 if you include the area around it. And it got its name, Mariánské. Maria is the Virgin Maria who gave birth to Jesus. There was this soldier. He came there and he prayed because he was wounded. So he prayed to the Virgin Maria to be healed. And the next day he found this CO2 source, and he could heal his wound. So that's the rise of the name of the city. So it's quite a fascinating history for a CO2 nerd like me to tap into this. And I've experienced those mineral baths myself, and it's extremely relaxing. And what we have done then is to create an artificial CO2 bath by creating this cardi suit, if you have seen that, where you basically put on a suit that you go when you go, a diving suit, and then you fill it up with 100% CO2, so you look like a Michelin man, and then you absorb it through the skin, and it's really a parasympathetic experience where people feel really relaxed, like, being on a vacation for 2 weeks and really feel how you start to wind down.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. So what's the oldest reference then that you found? Because the Roman Empire is like, what, 2,000 plus years ago?
I think already, what's his name? Calling the founder of medicine, the Greek.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Socrates? No.
No, not Socrates. No, no. Hippocrates.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the
He,
Hippocratic Oath. That is what the
yes.
medical doctor adhere to. Yeah, I think there is a reference there, or the oldest. So we're talking maybe about 2,500 years or something like that.
Interesting. So do you think that the benefits of being in a spa situation can be matched by just doing slow, gentle breathing? Or do you think there's like an extra benefit that happens being surrounded and submerged in these mineral spas?
I think there is an extra benefit, and I think just the same. If you go do slow rhythmic breathing, and you sit in the heart of the city downtown, where a lot of traffic and all of that, while doing it out in the forest or
Mm,
near a lake or a sea, I think it would be more beneficial doing it in the forest, out in nature,
mm,
than in a more stressful situation. So I
mhm.
think it's the same. Um, there as well. Doing that, combining the two would be more effective, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and check, but I went with my wife to in the middle of Hungary. There's some hot springs,
Yeah.
but it's more like I don't know what you'd call it, like a seaside town, but it's in the middle of Hungary. There's no water, there's no sea, but everybody
Mhm.
goes there on holiday. But we went into the hot water. It was very milky and very cloudy, and a bit had lots of bits.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, and you go in there, but it's very hot as well. So I wonder now if that was a CO2 spa. I'll have to go and check. Do you know? Have you heard about the Hungary spa?
Well, in all Eastern Europe, there are a lot of these
It's
spas actually, yes.
interesting.
Yeah, Hungary
Mm.
for sure, Czechia, Romania,
Mhm.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because we might be going back there, so I'll be
Okay.
more vigilant of that now.
Yeah,
Um,
so they also do CO2 injections, and they have
okay.
dry CO2 baths as well in many of these spa facilities. Of
Mm.
course, it's not only about CO2, it's important to remember, but just the word spa itself, it has the origin. Well, there is some debate, but there is a town in Belgium called Spa,
Mhm.
which is built around a hot spring. So it could be that the word spa is derived from the mineral springs, and or another word is Latin for healing through water,
Mm.
sangitas per agua or something. Yeah,
Yeah. Interesting.
SPA, spa.
SPA. I only know of Spa in Belgium because that's where they used to have the Formula One, and I remember as a kid seeing
Okay.
the Spa track. But interesting. Yeah, because I think in Bath or Bath, however Brits want to say it, Bath.
Wow.
I think it's all closed now, right? I don't know if they even let the public in. I was interviewing that Dr. Jack Cruz, and he was saying they've shut it all down. They don't want people
Okay.
in there because it's a historical
Yeah, yeah.
place. It's a
Okay.
shame
Yeah.
though, right? Because then you're
Yeah.
missing out on all these natural benefits. From a wound healing point of view, and let's talk about wounds a little bit now. I want
Mhm.
to ask you the same question because let's talk about the kind of foot baths and all of the CO2
Yeah.
baths. But I guess the first thing I want to ask is if somebody's got a wound, like in some of the pictures we can put them on the screen actually, so people watching can see from your
Mm.
blog. But I would just be curious again to get your thoughts on if you've got like a wound on your hand, like I saw on your blog, could that be healed with breath holds and slow breathing, or do you think it needs the topical CO2 as well to accelerate that healing?
I think you can do both things. So the breath work, that part is definitely helping you to get more balance, right? But you may need also a topical application, and a direct application to speed up, to activate that healing in that part. So yeah, if you read the article I wrote the other day, yeah, about how C2 can help in wound healing, like I mentioned in that book from 1794, and one of the things he concluded, uh, we are fascinating of a remarkable feature, and that is that without exception, every single time we applied CO2, the pain went away. And then when we removed the CO2, the pain gradually came back, although it was less and less. So pain and healing, CO2 seems to have a great impact on that. So in order for a wound to heal, it really needs blood flow, it needs oxygen, it needs nutrients, it needs the immune system, and it needs a way to remove waste products. So if we think about it, we have all these cells in our body, 30 trillion cells, says those who have counted, which is a lot, right? But 80% of these cells are supporting cells. They are the blood cells supporting the other cells with these things, the oxygen and the nutrients, etc. So whenever you want to heal a wound, you need to ensure that you restore the circulation. And that is what CO2 does because of its vasodilation effect. And then it also induces the Bohr effect, right, which kicks off the oxygen from the blood. So if you have a wound in your hand, you need blood there. So CO2 will dilate the blood vessels to get the blood there. And then you need the oxygen kicked off from the blood in order for it to reach the mitochondria so that they can produce more energy more efficiently and then get the energy to start the healing process. And CO2 is a major contributor in that, which is called the Bohr effect, to kick off the oxygen from the blood, mainly by having the molecule hemoglobin changing shape. In the lungs, the hemoglobin sucks up oxygen. It has a high affinity for oxygen. And that's because the pH in the lungs is high, while at the site, for example, if I have a working muscle, it will produce heat and CO2 as part of the metabolism. And the heat, both the heat and the CO2 will lower the pH. So when the heat and the CO2 leaves my working muscle, reaching the blood, it will force the hemoglobin to change shape because it has one. Basically, we are like a computer. We have nuts and ones. We shift between these two states because all the actions that happens in our body is performed by our proteins, and most of them, they have two stable states, just like a computer, 0 and 1. So in the lungs, the hemoglobin has a state of 1. It has high affinity for CO2, for oxygen. And then at the site of this working muscle, whether it's the heart or my arm here, or it's somewhere else in my body where there is a need for oxygen, there will also be higher levels of CO2 and more heat, which will then lower the lower the pH, and that will then force the hemoglobin to change shape.
Yeah, I was reading. I'd be good to get your thoughts on this. Like when the blood is more alkaline, the hemoglobin is like a catcher's mitt. It's kind of bent and it's catching the molecules. And then as the acidity happens and the pH drops, it kind of opens up and it releases those molecules. So you have this kind of fluctuation, almost like a diaphragm. That's happening with the pH levels. Obviously, this is at such a biological low level. I've never seen this, but I was just reading about it the other day. I found it quite cool how that shape is constantly changing. And if we're over breathing and we're mouth breathing, then we're preventing that process from naturally happening. And then that's when the Bohr effect's not, do
Yes,
its job.
and also if we engage in these fats, if we eat these fats that are more rigid, so all the cells, they have walls and like doors and the roof and floors, just like in our homes. So if we were to build our home with poor material, it would not withstand the next storm or the next rain or the next winter. And it's the same when we build the walls of our cells, the cell membranes. The cell membranes contains of fat. So if we use poor fat, they will be brittle. They will be more rigid So they can't do what you said. They can't be flexible. So that's one thing. They will be less flexible, and they will also be more prone to oxidate when free oxygen radicals come along. So they will be more sensitive to imbalance between oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Yeah, very interesting. I'd like to talk a bit about CO2 tolerance
Yeah.
to get your thoughts on a couple of things. So, number one, how would you measure? Because we've got things like control pause and different things. So, like, if you were going to like assess me right now, like, what would you be looking at? Would it be breath speeds? Would it be breath holds? Can you just talk us through some assessments that you might or have gone through in the past with people?
Yeah, so the first is the overall assessment by just looking at a person. Like if we think that all muscles that attach to the rib cage, they are breathing muscles.
Mm.
Our main breathing muscle is the diaphragm, but there are a number of muscles that attach to the breathing, to the rib cage that also influence our breathing. So if you have a slumped posture, if you have shoulders turning inwards, then or if you have like a hunchback, um, those are signs of how you're breathing, and those are signs that the muscles are not relaxed, so they impair you to take an optimum breath, a free breath, if you like. So one uh, set of exercises we have developed is just simply to, for example, look to the roof or look over the shoulder, and then you just stay in that position and you take 5 or 10 big breaths to do a stretch from the inside. So if I look over the shoulder and then I take a big breath in, fill my lungs completely, and then a slow exhale. And that is a way to stretch these. So that if I see someone with a poor posture, see someone that has is not using the diaphragm, I will let them do a different set of exercises to counter that. So that is one thing, and then I would assess what I call CO2 tolerance, which would then be either to just use the relaxator and see how long they can blow out for at the highest resistance, either sitting or walking, or I would just do the bolt score or the Buteyko control pause, either sitting or walking to assess the breathing, but also paying attention to the breathing while talking. A lot of people, they talk very fast, which means that they are breathing fast as well, right? Or they they do all kinds of sounds, which means that those are big breaths usually. We sigh, that's a big breath, or we take a big breath before talking. These kind of things,
Mm.
and if possible, I would like also to assess the heart rate and the heart rate variability.
Mm. How what would you use to assess that? What kind of is it multiple devices, or do you have a favorite device?
Well, the thing is, I don't see clients. I haven't done that for a long time,
Sure.
so it's more like um, I just do it on my own. Then with my I have, which may not be feasible in a clinical setting. Like
Mm.
I have my chest band, for
Okay,
example,
chest band. Yeah.
polar or yeah.
Gotcha. And would it be fair then to say, because everything I've just listened to you talk about there, it doesn't actually involve breath holds. It was more about slow breathing. So where do you stand on breath holds versus slow breathing for CO2 improvements?
Yeah, I mean, breath holds is the fast route, yes. So, and studies show that there could be great advantages, right? And many people testify to that. I think, however, that slow breathing is better, and I guess that's why I'm advocating that, because you mentioned it earlier, email apnea. What is that? It's breath holding. Sleep apnea at night, that is breath holding. So I'm not 100% certain that that is the optimum way to achieve a better CO2 tolerance by doing breath holding in the long term. In short term, you get a really nice positive effect. But long term, you may then, if you do a lot of these, you may then actually train yourself to do more of the email apnea and more of the sleep apnea.
Interesting. So you would be more of an advocate of just breathing gently and slowly and controlling the breath as opposed to just locking it.
Yeah, but
Mm.
the society we live in, everyone wants a quick effect, right? So telling them to just breathe slowly, and they may be too impatient to do that. So then a great start would probably be to do breath holds to get their attention. Or I rarely do Wim Hof breathing, for example, but that could be a great start for people as well. But I think then once you start to notice the benefit, it could really, you stress the body when you do Wim Hof breathing, when you do the forceful breathing, you reduce, you lower the CO2 and you increase the oxygen. So the body becomes under stress, and then the body is forced to adapt. And then you do the breath hold afterwards, where you restore the balance between CO2 and oxygen. And a lot of people notice that they get like a wake up, they get more energy, and they get positive effect from that. But I will see that more like a starting point than thinking that, okay, Wim Hof breathing is great for me, I get great benefits, I should do this for the rest of my life. I think once you have discovered breathing, whether that is true breath holds or Wim Hof breathing or whatever, then you can start to also pay attention to your daily breathing habits, which is our main message. How do you breathe when you're in the car, when you concentrate and focus, when you watch an action movie, when you clean or cook or whatever?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What goes through your mind when you're doing very, very slow breathing? Because I've found that there is a CO2 tolerance aspect. We have a natural limit or impulse to breathe, control pause. But
Yeah.
then when I think about free divers
Hmm.
and some of these top athletes, there's a huge psychological component that comes in. Like I think about Tom Zitas, the world record holder.
Hmm.
When he's doing his breath holds underwater, he's bringing in the feelings of joy to help him go longer. And he
Right.
tested anger and different things. And so I'll just be curious to get your thoughts on if you're doing very slow breathing, Relaxator, or you've got the carbo inhaler on and that impulse to breathe is coming up for you.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about, or what are you doing in terms of relaxation to help you go through that difficult period?
So I can go back to then when I did some breath holding, free diving underwater. Um, I just try to remain calm. I think more like meditation, like just staying calm and maybe just thinking about nature or a sunset or something really calming. But more maybe so even just emptying the mind. But at the same time, I haven't stretched it like Tom Setas and the guys like that. So probably if you aim to do more and more, you would do things like he's doing, like joy, for example. And but I think that aspect is very important. So when I did my free diving, I remember when the stress and worry and fear took over, I almost immediately had to go up to the surface. So within a 10-minute range, it could be that here I could only do 30 seconds because, oh, I forgot to do that at work. Oh, shit. And then I got stressed out. Oh, I can't be underwater any longer. I need to go up. And then 10 minutes later, I could do 3 minutes because I was able to keep that calmness. And actually, it reminds me of a very interesting and cruel study I read the other day doing on rats, and they put them in water and had them swim. And they concluded it was the science of hopelessness more than anything. So what they did was that they cut the, I don't know what it's called, the hair they have on the side of the mouth to feel with. So they cut them. So they started with taking 12 rats, tame rats, and they cut these hairs and then they put them in water, and the first 3 they died, they drowned within just a few minutes. And then the next 9 they could swim for 40 to 60 hours. And then they took some wild rats, and then they did this, and then they did that. And after time, they realized, okay, let's write down what are the steps we're doing here. First, we are holding the rat, and then we are clipping off the hair, and then we do this, and then we do that. And more they realized that probably the first 3 rats, they were more rough with them. They hold them harder. They were not used to the protocol. So they were, the people doing the test, they were more stressed themselves. And the rat at some point just felt hopeless. So when they entered the water, they didn't do anything. They were in a state of freeze. They were in complete parasympathetic, over parasympathetic. They had not high adrenaline or anything like that. They were way past that. They had just given up. So over time, I think they killed 2,000 rats in this horrible experience. It was in the 1950s. They noticed that if they trained the rats, they put them in water, and when they were about to drown, they took them up again, installed some hope, and then they did that a few times. So then all of them could swim for these 40 to 60 hours, so that they could then do what they wanted to do, because they wanted the rats to be on the same level, right? They don't wanted some rat to be traumatized because of the treatment before going into the water, and another one not being traumatized. So I think the mental and emotional aspect is huge in a lot of situations. Often when we go into disease, you can see there was a traumatic event happening a year or 2 year or 3 years before we got that cancer or that health challenge.
Hope. Yeah, hope's a very powerful.
Yeah, and hope, that goes in line with joy and harmony and all of
Yeah.
these positive emotions, right?
Yeah.
I tend to think of it sometimes when we go to the toilet in the morning, we don't have any doubts whether we should be able to, or at least the vast majority of us. We just go there, do our thing, and then we're done with it. If we could treat the challenges we face in daily life in the same way, we have confidence, we're going to fix this, we know how it's going to play out, so we are calm, then there is a lot higher chance that we will actually have our mind and our emotions with us in that specific challenge, and being able to overcome it. And I think that is one of the side effects of this reducing oxygen, raising CO2 modalities that I have been engaged in now for 16 years, that you get more of that confidence. You have more faith in that you're able to overcome the challenges. And one aspect we see, one hypothesis I have, that when we use this carbohaler and inhale extra CO2, the nose is the only one of our senses that is in direct contact with our with our brain, that doesn't filter out the stimuli. So if we smell something, it goes directly into the brain. So when we inhale extra CO2, you expose your hippocampus, your center for short-term memory, and your amygdala, your center for fear and difficult emotions. You expose it to extra CO2. And one hypothesis we have is that when you do that, you actually reprogram the amygdala to tolerate higher levels of CO2, and over time you will perceive the world as less stressful, less fearful, meaning you will have more faith, you will have more confidence in that the challenges you face, you're able to overcome them. And the reason how this theory came was that I have a long history of doing push-ups. Since I was 13, my record was 80 push-ups in a row, and I think 25,000 push-ups in a month. And ever since, I've been checking in once in a while, a few times per year maybe. Let's see how many push-ups can I do. and I've been able to do around 40, 41 push-ups. And then I started with conscious breathing, and my baseline then, out of the blue baseline, without doing a single push-up for 3 months, let's see how many I can do. It's slightly increased to 43, 44. But now my baseline, since I started inhaling CO2, it has increased to 55, 56. And it's not that I'm getting younger, on the opposite. So I think it's not that I have more muscles. I definitely not do more workouts than I have done in the past. I think that the reason is that the amygdala perceive the world as less stressful. So I basically, because when we engage in the stress and fear, which most of it is not needed, right? We worry about things that will never happen. So we waste a lot of energy. If you stop waste, if you reduce the worry by 10%, you can use that energy to do more push-ups in my case, right? So that's the hypothesis, that since I don't have more muscles, I don't do more workouts. One aspect of the CO2 inhalation is probably that you open up the airways and the blood vessels, so slightly more efficient oxygenation. And the other aspect, I think, is the mental and emotional. So actually, the chemoreceptors we have in our brainstem that checks the CO2 levels and makes us take the next breath, these chemoreceptors are also in our amygdala, the same chemoreceptors. And that is why there is such a close correlation between our breathing and our emotions. So studies show that they took a bunch of people and they checked their breathing, and they tried to get them in different states, anger, sadness, by doing different things. And they noticed that they had specific breathing patterns in those emotions. And then they tried to induce those emotions and checked on the breathing. And they were then having the same breathing patterns. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm phrasing it right here, but anyway, they showed a clear correlation. When they started to breathing in a certain way, they experienced higher levels of these emotions, and vice versa. When they experienced these emotions, they noticed certain breathing patterns.
Hmm. I remember in James Nestor's book Breath, he took a 30% CO2 breath, and it
Yeah.
was like instant panic. What's the most that you've ever experienced, either with your own or others? Like, can you talk us through about some of the things you felt with high levels of CO2?
Yeah, so I'm also the curious guy, want to see, test the limits, but I don't know. One thing I found interesting, which we have found out the hard way, is that when you read all these research studies talking about different percentage of CO2, none of them that I've come across talk about the pressure, the speed of the air, whether it's normal air or air spiked with CO2 that comes to your face and mouth. And we have found that there is a huge difference. If I have a device that can measure exactly the amount of CO2, let's say 5% CO2, and then you direct that to the mouth and nose at a certain speed with a certain pressure, you will get one feeling. But if you take the same CO2 level, 5%, and then you double the speed, you will perceive that as very hard. So if it's 5% with half the speed and pressure, would be perceived as too stressful from a scale from 1 to 10. The same 5% when you double the speed and pressure of the incoming flow, it may be perceived as an 8, very stressful. So I have found that it's a bit hard to just use the percentage as a measurement, but I have tried so much CO2 that I became very dizzy and just been able to withstand for a few breaths. Not the 30%, I think, where you maybe can only do one breath. I think 30 or 35% is even what I've seen in some studies that they use. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting about the relaxation because when I did my free diving retreat with Zitas, I was away for a week in Corfu, and it was amazing, and I tripled my breath hold in 3 days, with
Wow.
Tom. It wasn't great to start off with, but it was going from a minute to over 3 minutes, and that was just doing coherence breathing,
Right.
facing the water, obviously with a professional, and he's just guiding you to relax, 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 and
Yeah.
and um, I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. I knew that if I had a few more days, I could have got above 4 minutes, but we had to move on to different things. But anyway, um,
Uh,
when I got back home, I went into the sauna at the leisure centre. And
mhm.
normally after about 20 minutes, I'm really like panicking. I need to get
Yeah.
out. And I
Yeah.
got to 30 minutes. I was like, this is easy compared to not being able to breathe. And so something had shifted in my
Yeah.
nervous system where
Yeah.
being under intense heat, actually, it wasn't perceived to be anywhere near as stressful as it was before I was doing the long breath hold work. So I remember that. What's interesting now is I haven't done a lot of long breath hold work for a while. And so I've kind of balanced back into 20 minutes of sauna. I'm like, oh my God, I need to get out again
Right.
now.
But that is so interesting. So your limitation in the sauna is mainly then mental and emotional, right? And it seems like your breath hold training addressed that. And it makes so much sense if we go back to where we discussed about the constricting of the blood vessels. When you blow off too much CO2, the brain will shrink. The brain will get less blood and less oxygen and less nutrients, and that will create a more stressful brain. Meaning that you're being in the sauna, uh, you have less reserves basically. While if you have a fully oxygenated brain, full blood flow coming to the brain, you will then be able to withstand more. It's like a tree that has very shallow roots. Whenever a slight wind comes along, it will just fall over, while the tree with deep, deep, deep roots will withstand even the toughest storm, right? And survive for centuries. I think that's the same with us. You can see the analogy with if you have diaphragmatic breathing, that would be like the tree with big roots. You will be grounded, you will be relaxed, you will be able to withstand someone yelling at you. While if your breathing is high up in your chest, it's almost like you have these shallow roots. You will not be able to, you will easily be knocked over.
Hmm.
Someone just say boo and you will
Yeah,
um,
very interesting. Yeah, no, it's actually a good reminder to get back into that really slow breathe. And I also remember when I did coherence breathing,
uh-huh.
and this was again learned this from Tom. Um, Zitas, when I would do a regular, I'll just lay down here and do a breath hold, and let's say I'll do a minute, and I'd be like, oh my God, I feel very urgent to breathe. When I
Yeah.
would do coherence breathing for about 10 minutes, I would get about 50% more space on my breath hold without doing anything else differently. And just
Right.
the body seems to just relax into a more parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on pre-preparation work before you do slow breathing?
Pre-preparation before doing slow breathing
Yeah,
or
because you could say that the slow breathing itself is the work, right?
yeah.
But then I feel like if you're doing breath holds or you're going to go really slow the breathing or you're going to use the mask, I wonder if I wonder if there's any preparation that could be done first to get you into a great state to do that, or would you say you don't need to do that? You just go straight into the slow breathing.
Well, I mean, everything affects our breathing. So if you stay up late and you go out
Mm,
and have 5 beers and eat junk food, that will have a huge impact on your capacity to stay calm, right? So I would prioritize sleep. I would prioritize relationships and laughter and relaxation and harmony. I would prioritize the food that doesn't have milk, sugar, gluten, bad oils, and I will prioritize physical activity, being outdoors. So that would be the preparation for me, yeah. Without being this, I see that sometimes in the biohacking world where I think people, they are so obsessed about living to 150 years that they forget to live. Because if you ask them about what is your morning routine, and it will take them 10 minutes to list all the things. So we kind of forget to live sometimes, I think, when we get too obsessed. So I'm saying these things, refraining from milk. I forgot alcohol as well. I think that's a big thing to reduce that. But doing all these things without feeling that life is a struggle, that you're too obsessed, so that you cut out all the things you like, so that you find yourself being a victim, and you may live longer, but you are bored as
I know
f.
what you mean. I
Yeah.
actually was thinking about this the other day because I think we live at a time right now where there is a chance with AI and all of this biohacking information and all this science that maybe
Right.
we will be the generations that live the longest. But then I think that's a bit of a trap because if you live your life thinking like I'm going to live to 200
Yeah.
and you don't, then that's a really cruel trick to have put on yourself. And so I was thinking about this a lot recently. I was thinking it's better to just assume you're going to live a normal life, and if you get some bonus years, amazing. But don't live your life like you're going to live to 200 because you probably won't.
No.
So I don't know. That's just something that I've been
Yeah, but
thinking
that
about.
is so interesting. And if you look at the oldest woman, the oldest person that have ever lived, 122 years, I think that's 4 years older than anyone else. What did she do? Well, she smoked till she was 110, I think. She ate up to 1 kilo of chocolate per week. She had port wine after each dinner. And also, if you look at relationships, she didn't have a big family. She had one daughter that died at the age of 37, and then she had a grandchild who also died at the age of 37. So she had no close family, but she found her relationship with friends. So I think, again, that is another key, the relationships. And again, I think that boils down to emotions and feelings and hope and harmony. Those kind of things. We feel that life is worth living if you have these long list of supplements or list of activities you have to do. At some point, your life will become more like a bunch of chores to do, instead of actually a willingness to live. The laughter, the creativity, all these kind of more subtle things that I don't think we can really measure, but we all know when we have had a good time, someone we like to hang out with, and these things I think are very important for us if we talk about longevity.
Yeah, I have an aura ring that I wear sometimes that measures, HRV and sleep scores and these things.
Yeah,
And I'm very anal about my sleep routine. I have magnesium and red light blocking glasses, and all these things. And
yeah,
then a little while ago, we went to like a festival with my son. He's like 2 years old, and it was like monster trucks and
mhm,
fireworks, and all day I was barefoot in the sun. Okay, and on the way home, really late night, had McDonald's because that's the only food we could get at this time. I was like, oh, this is terrible. I had the best sleep I had all year.
yeah,
I had the highest freaking sleep. I was like, what is going on? And it was just being with my family, friends,
yeah,
sunlight, grounding, relaxed. And so it's just a good reminder that we can do all of these scientific things, which are still obviously important. But I think
yeah.
you make a good point, Anders, around like the
And I can relate to that as well. I can be very anal about things. So I remember when I translated a book from English to Swedish about low intense training, and for years I used this watch. Whenever I was out jogging, I checked my pulse all the time. And the greatest day was actually when the pulse watch broke. I felt such a relief, and that was actually, I was just transitioning to nasal breathing, so it was perfect timing because then I could just do nasal breathing to check in. I found that if I can easily do 3 steps on the inhale and 4 steps on the exhale, I know that I'm in the pulse range, which is low intense for my body. So then I don't need to check the pulse every time, because then my competitive mind also kicks in. So always trying to set records. So I think that was the main thing why I was so happy when it broke. And yeah, I don't know about you, but if you're at all competitive and you have all these, you have a tendency, I think, to become more, particularly more anal about doing things in the right order and all of that, and you can't miss out on this or that. But there is then a risk that we kind of miss out on life and the
I
good
agree.
things, like you describe with your son.
I agree. I became way too anal about sleep, and because it's so important. And if you don't sleep properly,
Yes.
you're going to die. And so,
Sure.
but I won't wear the ring now because in the morning, the first thing I do is check my score. And if I've got a bad score, then I will allow that to ruin my day, and that's
Yeah.
crazy. And like, if I didn't know the score, I feel pretty good, and I'll look at my score like, oh, I should feel crap now. So I've stopped with
I have
that.
the
So.
same experience. I've
Yeah.
also stopped the Aura ring, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. So I did have this other rule where I would wear the ring and only check it once a week, but then it wasn't kind of working for me either. Anyway, if someone's got a
Yeah.
better idea, let us know. Last question for you, Anders. I would love to get your thoughts, an update on this question. Air quality and CO2 levels in the air. And so when we spoke and when I've listened to James Nestor talk, and there was a study he was quoting around cognitive decline in school children with higher CO2 levels. I think above 1500 on the scale. Then I spoke to Dr. Dave, who, thank you for connecting us, a recent podcast that we have.
Yeah.
And he was saying quite an interesting thing. He was saying, CO2 is very political. And there's a lot of information around climate change, and it's become very weaponized in politics. And so
Right.
it's quite beneficial to have information out there saying higher CO2 levels are actually bad for you, and we need to change the climate to fix this. So I thought that's an interesting perspective on it as well. So I just thought, in 2025, let's just get your thoughts now on what you think, because you've been walking around with a device, right? Mine just died. I had the battery. I had mine for 2 years. The battery just died this week. I need to replace it. But since you've got your air quality device and you've been thinking about this, where are you now on CO2 levels in the home and in the bedroom? What do you think is safe and good?
So one aspect, if we just take a big step back and we can look at the nature, and we can see that there are a number of animals that actually either they develop traits like a swan with a long neck or a giraffe with a long neck to actually trap more CO2 in their body, or the bighorn sheep that have big sheep that actually contains large reservoirs of CO2, or you have bats sleeping in caves where their excrements will lead to higher formation of CO2 in these caves. So they may have 5% CO2 in those caves. They live very long, these bats, or as we mentioned before, the naked mole rat living in an environment where there is high CO2. There are many other creatures. A tortoise could live to 200 years, have very slow breathing, 4 to 6 breaths per minute. Many different animals seems to have seeking out environments or developed traits in order to expose themselves to higher levels of CO2, which then, if we look historically, when the dinosaurs were here, at some point, maybe the oxygen levels were 50% higher than today. Today we have 21%. At the time, they could be up to 30%. The temperature maybe was 20% higher than today. But the CO2 levels, they were 300, 400, 500, 600% higher, telling us that maybe the reason why the life on the planet was flourishing, there were bigger plants and there were these bigger animals, bigger than anyone that has lived since then, could be attributed to higher levels of CO2. So it could be that us humans, we are seeking subconsciously environments that are richer in CO2. So we talked about the benefits of staying outdoors, but the fact is that we spend 90 to 95% of our time indoors, where typically the levels of CO2 are higher. We get more and more people in like we move into cities. So the more people come together, we are all CO2 factories producing CO2. So when a group of people stay in a conference room, for example, for 3 hours, they will increase the levels of CO2. So it could be that we actually seek out environments. Some people say, "Oh, I love to go in the car and drive around," and there you will have higher levels of CO2. They can increase quite fast in a car because it's a very small space. So all of this, or we drink more and more carbonated beverages, which contains CO2. So I think I can agree with Dr. Day there, yeah, that there is maybe a political aspect wanting to cement CO2 as the villain, not only when it comes to the body as just being a waste product, get it out there as soon as possible, but also when it comes to the climate change, that the CO2 is considered the main villain, right? The oceans, they are a big reservoir of CO2. So when the oceans get hotter, they will release more CO2. So that's the difference between drinking a cold or a warm Coca-Cola, or a cold or a warm beer. The warm doesn't taste so nice, right? The cold beer or cold Coca-Cola, it contains more CO2, because the colder the water, the more CO2 it will hold on to. The warmer it is, the more CO2 it will release. So then it's considered that when we get more CO2 in the atmosphere, that will make some of the sun, the warmth from the sun, it will be reflected back to the earth. So normally the sun beam comes, hit the earth, and then it will be reflected back into space. But when there are more CO2 in the atmosphere, it's considered then that more of the heat from the sun will be trapped on the earth, which will then lead to the earth becoming warmer and warmer. So that's the theory. So that CO2 is the big villain then. But I think when you look at the classroom, and you say that these studies that you mentioned, and they say that you have 1,000 ppm or 1,500 ppm, which is 2-3 times as much, and is in the atmospheric air, which has roughly 400 ppm, and that then you get poor concentration, for example. You get less cognitive function. But I think we need to add the aspect here of dosage. So when we look at the dinosaurs and say that they could tolerate 2,000 ppm or 3,000 or 4,000 ppm in the air, that didn't happen overnight, not in 1 year either, or 10 years, maybe over centuries or thousands of years that happened. So when we see now how the CO2 increasing in the atmosphere at a very high rate, so the data from Hawaii is telling us that the ppm levels 60 years ago was about 350, I think, and the ppm levels now being 425. The increase is quite rapid. And the fact that we spend more time indoors and that our houses are more insulated, so we are probably exposed to more and more CO2 at a rapid speed, in a way that our body can't really adjust to, which then means that just like when I put on the mask and inhale extra CO2, I will start to breathe faster. So this quick increase in CO2 exposure may actually lead for many people to being caught in an overbreathing state, because they are not able to cope with the increase in CO2. But if we are aware of it, we see that this is a challenge where wherever we turn, if we move into the city and we're exposed to more people, or there is more CO2 in the atmosphere, or we spend more time indoors, we are then exposed to more CO2, and that we are aware that that drives our breathing. And if we don't adapt, we will end up in this endless overbreathing, which will then take a toll on our health over time. But if we are aware of it and if we can address it, then I think we can use that potential disadvantage that dooms us to a stressful life to actually an advantage, where we learn to tolerate higher levels of CO2. And we should also bring in the COVID situation where people put masks on, which increased the CO2 inhalation a lot. A mask could contain up to, I think these N95 masks, up to 6,000 ppm. Yeah, so that's another factor that maybe on one level we are seeking ways to improve CO2, but if it goes too fast, it doesn't benefit us. It goes on the opposite.
Interesting. Yeah, this room would get to about, I mean, the battery's dead now, but about 1600 when the doors close. It's not a very big room.
Yep.
I took my CO2 monitor on a plane to Mexico, so it was a 10-hour flight.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this is going to be juicy. It never went above 800, which I found fascinating. So there was a really good cleansing of the air on the planes. And I expected it to be like 5,000 or something by the end of the 10 hours.
I have the same experience. Yeah.
So it was really good. Yeah, anyway, that's really useful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a lovely place to close. And so, the benefit of everybody is to, work on our breathing because, most of us are breathing poorly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to also, like my favorite example, if you go to the gym and you're completely unfit, you really have to pay attention to the dosage, right? And it's the same with the breathing. It's not like when I started my breathing practice and thought, right, I should have the world's best breathing in the shortest period of time. And I realized the hard way that that's not the way to do it. The key is relaxation.
Yes.
That's the headline. You want the relaxation. So you want to increase the dosage, whatever you do, breath holds or slow walking with nasal breathing or you inhaling CO2 or whatever, you need to take it step by step. There are no shortcuts really when it comes to breathing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like building muscle, right? It's like you don't go into the gym on the first day and try and pick the heaviest weight up because you're going to injure yourself. You've got to have that progressive load. And I found that to be true with this. Yeah, you're right. There's hacks and things we can do to maybe accelerate a little bit, but ultimately it feels like it's consistency and love. I always say it's consistency and patience when people are going through this. Yeah, it's hard because we want it now, but thank you. So if people want to learn more from you and they want to connect with you, where are we sending them? Where can they go after this podcast?
Consciousbreathing.com is our website. Yeah,
wonderful. And go down there and you can get the first 2 chapters of Anders' book. And if you're watching this before the end of September 2025, you could win a carbo inhaler. So get in there now and have a look at Anders' website. Anders, thank you so much, my friend. I'll see you again very soon. Take care. Pleasure here as well.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Hey, thank you so much for sticking all the way through to the end of the podcast. I mean this so much. It means the world to me that you would watch this podcast, engage with it, and stick all the way through. So genuine thank you. You're the reason that we do these interviews. I love speaking to all these people and sharing this amazing info. And I hope you got something from it. If something did stand out for you, then please put a comment on the YouTube video because it'll help embed it for you, but it'll also give somebody else something they can take away as well. And just while you're here, just a reminder that if you're exhausted, you've got any form of burnout, or you feel like you might be heading towards burnout, you've got some stress and anxiety, our 7-day burnout reset program is free for a limited time. And the only caveat I have, the only thing I'd say is if you're going to do it, just do it. Don't delay, don't get it and then think I'll do it next month. Just do it. It's only 7 minutes a day, and I promise you'll feel different after 7 days. Each day I'm going to give you a different exercise to do. It's only a couple of minutes. At the end of the week, you will have felt all these different exercises that I've picked. I've chosen these amazing exercises, and you'll feel more relaxed, you'll feel calm, you'll hopefully sleep a little better, and you'll learn a few extra things about the breath as well. So the link's down below. We're normally charging nearly $100 for this. We're giving it away, just giving it away for free. So grab it while it is free. And I cannot wait to hear how you get on. If you're looking for something to do after this podcast, I would say get the course. I was going to give you a video to watch or something like that. Don't do that. Get the course, and I look forward to reading your comments below. All right. Have a beautiful day, and just know that whatever state you're in right now, whatever led you to this podcast or this channel, know that there is hope out there, and that millions of people have shifted their lives, their mental health and their physical health. And you too can do the same thing. And I believe in you and I trust you. All right. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.